Hi, Matt. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for joining me. I know it's a little bit early in Philadelphia. It's eight
No
o'clock.
problem.
But yes, it's difficult with all the time differences. So we're just trying to get everyone together. This is actually probably the only time that we can get most of our audience online because
Sure.
it's
Sure.
not too late.
That's tough when you have it's a good problem to have with a global community.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's actually really cool because we're learning from so many different people and voices, which is
Sure.
great. So, everyone, welcome to our divergent discussion. My name is Carla. I'm a registered psychotherapist. I'm also currently doing my PhD here in Portugal, specifically on ADHD in women. I'm the clinical lead at Caboose. And what is Caboose? So, Caboose exists to create belonging, understanding, and support for neurodivergent people. At the heart of what we do are our neuro nuggets, our short, practical guides that help you understand how your brain works and find ways to make work and life easier. They also help workplaces build genuinely inclusive spaces. This is just a reminder that the Divergent discussion is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So if you have time, you can definitely check those out. There are some amazing chats that we've had, and I believe this one will be too. If we have time for audience questions, we will get there. So if you have questions, please just pop them in the question section. We just saw Julia. It's 11 o'clock in Brisbane, Australia. So it's a little bit late on that side, but we're kind of getting to all the time zones. And then I'm going to do a quick bio for Matt. Matt, thank you for joining us again. Matt
My
Canning is
pleasure.
a neurodivergent founder. He's a former Fortune 50 executive leader and a father. He's the CEO of NoPlex, and we'll be speaking about NoPlex.ai in a little bit today. And you've also written extensively on the topic of personal and professional structure. And that's actually going to be my first question about structure. So just
Sure.
to kind of prep you, but welcome and thank you for being here. When you say structures,
Mhm.
what do you actually mean in a neurodivergent context? Is it different to routines, productivity systems that we usually hear of, or is it just being organized?
That's a great question. I guess I'll start by saying that when I talk about structures in a neurodivergent context, I don't mean them any differently than I do for someone who's neurotypical. But I would make the case that for a neurodivergent individual, structures are more important. They're more critical to being able to live the life that you want to live. I see it as, you mentioned, I think you said routines. I see routines as something where the structures are kind of they're one layer higher than that, right? They're like the artifacts and the processes that define and enforce your routine, right? So, um, if you think of an example of a routine, like a weekend trip, right? So, if you have kind of a prep list for going away for a weekend, right? The things you need to pack, the things you need to do, and everything like that. Um, Structures for me are so that's the routine. I would say structures are how you build that routine so that you have access to it, right? So it results in all the right things in all the right places, et cetera, right? And if you think of it like, I think you also mentioned, how's it different from just being organized? I see being organized as a state of being, and structures are the things that allow that state to exist. So, as an example, and I only bring it up because it's actually in my other monitor here. I meet a lot of people through my job. I'm always trying to keep track of who I spoke with, what we spoke about, when was the last time we spoke, when I should follow up, things like that. So for me, that's being organized. Like my professional contact methods are organized, but the structure that I have around them is the database and the interface that I created in Notion to keep track of all that. So that's the structure. And then being organized is the state. And then, you mentioned, I think you said like productivity systems or productivity tools. Productivity systems and productivity tools are, they can do a very good job if they're retrofit properly to work the way that your mind works. They can actually provide structure, but you just want to make sure that you aren't seeking productivity when you're actually trying to organize your life, right? And I think there's a big distinction there. And that's something that NoPlex is very hinged on, the difference between productivity and what we call chaos management.
Okay, yeah, I really like that because I do feel we have a lot, as neurodivergent individuals, we have a
Mhm.
lot of that feeling of I should be adding more tools to my daily schedule because then I'll be
Sure.
more productive. And it's
Right.
actually, yeah, it's a big difference. We're quite productive. We just need structure and to know like when to focus on what.
Yeah. And I would argue that the productivity, well, first off, I think there's a toxic sort of productivity culture, especially in America, but globally, right? And this whole idea of needing to stay productive, the hustle sort of side of that as well, but then also just the the loop that you find yourself in. I know a lot of people find themselves in where they feel like you're constantly failing, right? Because what productivity culture is telling you. And it's funny, when we talked about chaos management as kind of the theme for NoPlex, and to some degree kind of like the anti-productivity tool, I use this example. I gave a talk a while ago and I use this example where imagine that I put up flyers all over town and that said, I'm giving a talk on personal finance. Come see my talk on personal finance. And all these people show up from all different walks of life. And the talk was called Going from Your First 10 million to 100 million. It's sort of like, okay, well, I obviously then just made a huge assumption
Mm.
about where the people in that room are going to be. And to me, that's productivity, right? If you're saying to the world, here's productivity, we're going to offer you something to become more productive. I think the assumption is that people want to be more productive. And I think a lot of cases, productivity is almost like this luxury for when you have everything kind of together and you have your chaos managed. So we're
Mm.
kind of looking at it that way. If you want to be productive,
Sure.
you can use NoPlex for it. That's fine, but that's not what this is for. This is just for managing life's chaos.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that because I think that we're starting a lot of projects as neurodivergent individuals and
Mm,
we kind of run with our ideas and we're constantly busy. And I
yeah,
definitely agree with the culture that's pushing us to always be busy.
yeah,
And then, we're busy with so many different things, but we didn't take that moment to just kind of reassess, okay, is this something that needs that amount of energy or
mm,
can we just kind of do a base level which is difficult for us to just kind of do a draft
right.
and not spend hours on it. I do know as a neurodivergent individual myself, I often know what I should be doing or what am I
Mm,
supposed to be doing, but I still feel like, and I know many of my clients can't do it. We're still like, we know that we should be cleaning that room or, inviting the in-laws or whatever the case is. That was like a random example, but what's actually happening in the brain in that moment, do you think?
oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if, on the technical side, I think it's physiologically there's a lot happening. We're learning more about what's happening physiologically. This falls into your domain of expertise a bit more than mine, but it's fascinating to me that first off, um, neurodiversity is a big word that means a lot of different things and encompasses a lot of different lifestyles and identities and challenges. And so I think what happens physiologically changes. It varies from person to person and even varies within people who identify similarly. So even just ADHD, right? There's a lot of different, they just, it was a DRD2 gene that they recently discovered that has a very distinct role in the relationship between dopamine and norepinephrine and, all that stuff. But say just for ADHD, because that's a big focus of what we do, there's the concept of the default mode network, which was only, I think, discovered in the last 20 years or so, which is basically saying this is your brain screensaver. When you're not focused on a task, you fall into the default mode network. And this is a measurable state. And then the idea that when you go into like a task focused mode, if you have ADHD, your default node network still persists, right? So like so when you say what's going on in the brain, there's it's different things for different people, but there are physiological measurable things. I think that it's, when you ask, what to do, but it's hard to do what's happening in the brain there. I would make the case that a lot of times, and we've seen this with NoPlex, people know they understand the outcome that they desire more than they do the how, right? And I mean, this is we're all guilty of this to some degree. And so the reason why that's difficult for different people is, if you have if you struggle with impulse control issues, right? Then your challenges between what you know you need to do and how to do it and what you need to do are they're on a very short timeline, right? It's the impulse control challenge timeline. If you're someone who struggles more with follow through and being able to follow through on longer tasks because novelty fades, then your challenges are more on a slightly longer timeline. So the question of what's going on in the brain is on the physiological level, which is very complex and nuanced, and I'm certainly not qualified to talk about. But what's happening as far as how you're reacting to your own sort of default way of operating, that's different for everybody. You just have to understand it for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a big focus on understanding and being aware that our brains are different, and even
Yeah,
within neurodivergence, it's so different, like you said. So I think
yeah,
with my focus area specifically on ADHD women, and all the research that I'm seeing is just the differences in how our brain internalizes the messages that we hear, and how that then leads to shame and guilt,
sure.
and we kind of freeze, and that's our brain's way of saying, well, I'll rather just not do, I'll rather not attempt it because I know that I'm
Yes.
going to get it wrong. So there's so much going on behind the scenes that, yeah, I think it's important to have that person that goes through it with you, if it's a coach, a therapist, a friend, a partner, and then
Hmm.
also the system that works for you. What about the people? Because we hear this often, and I know from when we were kids as ADHDers, we often hear that you've got a lack of discipline. You've got so
Mm.
much potential. I've always heard that one. Carly, you're
Right.
so smart. You've got so much potential, and I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't sound nice. Like the
Right.
messages that we internalize, or the laziness one.
Hmm.
Why is that? Why is it such a harmful misunderstanding? Do you think? Well, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
pretty obvious question, but.
No, you know what though? It sounds obvious, but there's so many layers. I think that when you tell someone who has ADHD, why can't you just X,
Mhm.
right? You're basically saying wag your tail, right? You're asking them to do something that might make sense for one creature, but does not make sense for you because you don't have a tail and you literally don't have the physical ability to do that thing. And so, I mean, I think the biggest reason why it's so harmful though is other than that misunderstanding is the fact that culturally there's so much available information and advice and, tools for staying on track and all of this stuff, but they're primarily built by and propagated by neurotypical individuals. And so you find yourself in this position where it's harmful because if you say struggle with ADHD, you struggle with follow through, you're tired of it, you go out there and you try to find something that's going to work and you see all these reviews, oh, it worked for me, it worked for me, it worked for me, and then it doesn't work for you, you're going to internalize that. You're going to see that as a failure.
Mhm.
It's kind of like I think of it like, I want to get stronger. Okay, let me go look up how to get stronger. Great, lift weights this many times per week in this way, in this order, eat this much protein, and it will work for you. It worked for them. It worked for them. It worked for them. It worked for them. If you happen to have a myostatin inhibiting gene, it's not going to work for you. And you're going to think that you're doing something wrong yourself. That's why it's so harmful because the world is full of advice that is
Mhm.
not going to work for you. And so even if you try, even if you make your best attempt, you're going to end up feeling like, why didn't it work for me? What am I doing wrong?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a great point of like it being created by people that understand the brain, not just from a neurological point of view, but also from a lived experience point of view. I think
Yeah.
that's something that we focus on at Caboose too. Is I think most or all of us are neurodivergent
Mhm.
because it makes a difference if you understand. Okay, this might feel quite shameful, or this might not feel so nice for me, but maybe it helps another person. So, different tools help different people as well. So that's also something to remember. Okay, I'm going to try and stick to the questions today, which I don't often do, but let's see. Okay, so the next one that I have for you is we often only build supports around our difficulties, but you talk about building structures around strengths too, which I really
Mm.
like. What does that actually look like in real life, though? And can you give examples, maybe?
Yeah, sure. It's the same principle as it is with weaknesses. If you're somebody who just kind of go into the weaknesses thing, if you're somebody who you're constantly running out of things around the house, right? Like use an Amazon subscribe and save type thing, right? Like do something like put in structures, again, going to the theme of this conversation, put in the structures to make sure that you could either battle against your weakness or you could start to work around it in ways that are intelligent and manageable. And I feel the same way with your strengths. If there are certain things when people, there's kind of two cultural, um, these two cultural voices that battle around ADHD, right? One is it is a disability, and the other is it is a superpower. And I feel
Mhm.
like there's sort of a bit of a valley in the middle where people gravitate toward the extremes. And I think the reality is, first off, is a spectrum, right? For some people, it is more disabling than it is empowering, and vice versa. But I think for everybody, there's a little bit of both, right? And so if you look at the weaknesses as kind of those disabilities, like the things, the time blindness and things like that, but then there are superpowers, right? I can sit down at a computer and work
Mm.
from 7 in the morning
From
until
now until Christmas.
4. Yeah, but I'll look up at 4 in the afternoon and I'll say to
Yeah.
myself, like, I didn't go to the
Forgot to
bathroom, I
eat.
didn't eat, I didn't, right? Like that's probably not the best thing. But if you have the ability
Mm.
to really lock in on something and work on it, that's a bit of a superpower. So what I would argue is to the best that you can, and I know it's different for everyone with the nature of your life, the nature of your job, things like that, but to the best you can, structure how you work and how you can work around your strengths, right? If you are
Mm.
someone who can hyperfixate, really work to block off chunks of time that allow you to do that without those interruptions, right? So you're not constantly just feeling like you're in a treadmill. So it's things like that.
Mm.
What gifts does your situation bring you, and how can you use those to become a better, employee, founder, mother, spouse?
Mm. Yeah, I really like that. I worked with kids before I started working with adults, and
Mm.
I loved working with kids for, I think it was like about 12 years
Oh,
when I started working with kids. It was 20 something years ago now. And well, I was initially trained in ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis. It's a very structured approach. I walked away from it many, many years ago because I wanted more of an interest-based therapeutic modality. But
yeah,
that therapy, what it did was it would zone in on the children's weaknesses and just like really magnify it and say, okay, well, this child struggles with expressive language. Now we're going to focus every single session on expressive language. So it was, and this was 21 years ago. So it wasn't as, now they've changed it a little bit, but it was pretty systematic, structured, hardcore, very behavioral,
sure.
and I didn't like it. So that's why I created a holistic approach and interest based. But you could see, like, I mean, my pencil grip is like this, and it's still till today. I hold my pen like this, and they wanted to put me in the special class because of
Sure.
my pencil grip. And if you're going to focus on something that I'm not good at or not typical, because I write neatly, but if you're going to focus on that and put a magnifying glass over it, I'm definitely going to not be able to write because I'm getting so anxious. Because that's
Sure.
something that a lot of ADHDers struggle with, is that emotional overwhelm when
Yeah.
we feel like we're being looked at and observed. And so, yeah, I definitely agree that we shouldn't be focusing so much on the things that we struggle with. I struggle with cooking. I don't cook. So I have a lady here that she's lovely and she cooks for me and I go and pick up the food and it's affordable.
Sure.
And I don't feel ashamed anymore. Now I can hyperfixate on my studies and
Right.
neurodiversity, which I love. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so
There's
good
there's
for
something to
confidence.
be said for building structures around yourself that, if certain things are an uphill battle, there's a certain degree to which it's intelligent to try to get through them. But then there's a certain degree to which it's intelligent to just understand that's not your. So can I give you a really silly example?
Yes,
So I
please.
have this very weird type of blindness, right? Where this happens to me all the time. I needed more contact lens solution, right? So I open our closet and I look and I don't see any. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm bad at this. For some reason, this is like this weird thing. And I don't know if this has anything to do with, this just might be me as a
Yeah.
person. So I start at the top left and I just look at every shelf and I don't see contact lens solution. So my wife is walking by And she goes, it's right there. And she just points to it. And it was right in front of me. I looked past it 3 times.
Yeah.
So for me, my wife knows that that's something that I'm not particularly good at, much like I know there's certain things she's not particularly good at. And we just sort of help each other out, where
Yeah,
I
nice.
won't spend 10 minutes trying to find the thing in the closet that I can't find. I'll just, ask her when she walks by. So just,
Yeah.
don't
And
constantly battle. Just listen, I'm bad at that. I have weird object blindness sometimes. I don't know why, but so I married somebody who luckily does not.
that was the reason. That's the reason.
That
Like,
was it. That was the reason. I
this
was
is
like,
the
this is the
person
one. She can find the contact lens solution.
that was on the Tinder profile. I need somebody that's really good with details to help me
Exactly.
with my content.
It is funny though. I don't know if it's a coincidence or it's part of, but we definitely have like strengths, weaknesses, like
That's
in a
awesome.
lot of ways, which has been
Yeah.
very convenient for both of us. So we've both been able to sort of delegate things to one another throughout
Yeah.
life.
I mean, this is not today's topic, but I would love to do more chats on relationships
Mhm.
because I think it's so important to see that the person that we choose is also going to help or hinder some of the things that we struggle with.
Yeah.
Because if I marry somebody with ADHD, we're gonna have a lot of fun. There's gonna be like a lot of extreme sports going on, but probably not a lot of work and eating because we're just going to be outside doing stuff. I think yeah, it's important to have that in our profiles to say, well, maybe I need somebody that gives me a bit of grounding or helps
Yes.
me find the solution, the context solution.
The yin to your yang.
Exactly. Okay, so I want to jump over to if someone is trying to design a structure for themselves, where should they start? With energy, time, environment, tasks? What would you say? Or with strengths?
Actually, tying into what we just talked about, I would say that your gut does a very good job of telling you, right? And so if you really find yourself struggling with certain things and you just hate doing them, even if you're okay at them, you just hate doing them, the best thing you could do is to just try to find ways to, eliminate, systematize, automate, delegate those things, because at worst, you're preserving energy for other things. Right. So I would say just start with your gut. Don't over organize that. Just
Mm.
listen to your heart to some degree.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was that cooking, eh? Like
Sure.
everybody says, like, you're 41, Carla, or let's say 32. You're 32. No, I'm joking.
32.
You're 41. That should word.
There
Like,
you
you
go.
should be able to cook. What's up with you? And
Right.
when I stopped listening to that and I'm like, well, I dislike it. It's not that I can't cook. I even did cooking classes. I
Mhm.
still dislike it. It
Sure.
takes so long and you eat for 5 minutes. And I'm like, this is just a waste of my time. So
Sure.
when I took it away and I was just like, okay, well, I can spend my time doing research for, like studies and stuff, which I find way more interesting.
Sure.
And each to their own, like my friend is a chef and he's amazing at cooking and he should be cooking because he enjoys it. But I just think that if we can automate, find a way to have minions and not like, I'm not saying as people, but like as structures,
Sure.
like little structure, minion structures.
And AI agents are going to make that a little easier too over time once they
Exactly.
become more ubiquitous and available to people who don't have the technical background.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we can use AI for that, but not for everything else, like having conversations. We should have
So
normal conversations.
we should have normal
I have
conversations.
yeah, I have a big thing with this, with being a therapist, because I'm hearing so many generic responses in the way that
Mm,
neurodivergent individuals are being told the same thing over and over, and I'm like, oof, this can be quite dangerous. But
sure.
yeah, I like it when it's individualized. Okay, what about a small structural change that can make
Mhm.
a big difference for somebody who feels constantly overwhelmed?
Okay, I will give the same answer to everyone for this, regardless of anything relating to your disposition. Separate cognitive modes. And what I mean by that is, so one thing that let me back up. So for decades, and I'm sure you know this from your profession, when people feel overwhelmed, they feel, extreme stress, if they have lists. One
Yeah.
thing that has been kind of universally shared by therapists and coaches has been, listen, take your to-do list and walk over to a whiteboard calendar and just put 3 things in today's square. That's it, right? And then put your to-do list away and then just handle those 3 things. And then you've been successful today. If you want to take on more, that's fine, but
Mhm.
don't until those are done, right? So when you think of it, there's sort of these 2 cognitive modes there. There's curation and there's execution. Curation is where you manage your tasks, where you organize them, where you prioritize them, where you get rid of things, where you add things. And then execution is the things you actually need to take care of, right?
Mhm.
And you have decided that those are critical enough to leap from the curation
Mhm.
cognitive mode to the execution cognitive mode. So with NoPlex, that's something we took very seriously, right? That's something where we there's a we have a dashboard on the lock screen on iOS that you don't have to go into your phone. You don't have to unlock it to use it. That is your horizon, right? That's what we call your today view, right? These are the things you have to take care of. Don't worry about everything else. Through automation, through a bunch of different ways, things leave curation and go into execution. That's what your progress bar is based on for the day. That's what you're notified on if you haven't added anything by the late morning. That's what you're notified on if things are lingering late at night. It's this view of execution. So we created this ideally to help people with ADHD to manage, complexity and lists and task hoarding habits and things like that. Pretty early on after releasing our app, we started to get feedback from people with anxiety saying that NoPlex really worked for them. And I love this one quote from somebody. They said, if I have 30 things on my to-do list and I get rid of 3, all I see is 27 still standing there laughing at me.
Mhm.
And NoPlex separates that, right? And so the one thing I would say, whether or not you use our app, notepads, notes, and a whiteboard calendar, it doesn't matter. Separate those cognitive modes.
Mhm.
Never exist in a place where you constantly have to stare at all the things that are left to do that you haven't gotten to, that I'm failing to get to,
Mhm.
right? Like don't do that to yourself. It,
I
it
re-
doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, look, this is so relatable.
Sure.
That quote that you said with the person saying that the other 27 are just laughing at you. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, look at you. I
Right.
have that all the time. And I actually do separate. I love that curation list because we are experts in making it pretty and like
Yes.
using
Yeah.
new things, like making it colorful. And then we're like, "Oh, maybe if I prioritize it like these are super important, these are not so important, these are not important at all for this year at least,
Sure.
it will go better." But I think creating or actually using this is what you're doing really well is you're using ADHD symptoms or
Mhm.
characteristics to your advantage, which I love
Yes.
because what you're doing is you're saying out of sight, out of mind. And that's what we're really good at is with the lack of object permanence, right? So if it's
Mhm.
not in front of us, it can't laugh at us, which
Right.
is really
That's
nice.
exactly it. That I never thought of it that way, but I think there's something to that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, even for me, I use NoPlex, all day, and my Horizon does a very good job. I barely know what's on my curation list, right? Just because I've done the work to make it so that when things need to surface, they do surface. And
Yeah.
so, it really
That's not,
eliminates a lot of that stress and
yeah.
anxiety. And again, feeling like, oh, I need to,
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Yeah. I think also just like my list included at one point, it included like groceries, dog food, PhD, write a book. And then you would look at the list, you're like, okay, but this is going to take me 3 years, or
Yeah.
5 years, but groceries is on there. So I could have a
Right.
small win. So I really like that. I love that the distinction between them. Also just, I guess, time boxing
Mhm.
and making sure that you have the different times is important. What about like a lot of ADHDers would start something and then
Mhm.
we would fall off the wagon? So I know that I actually do some videos for apps and I get some comments like, oh, another app for an ADHDer.
Mhm.
What would you say, like, how do we design structures that are flexible and forgiving instead of like all or nothing?
First off, I love your use of the word forgiving because that really is it. So I think the first thing you have to realize is um, you are going to fall off, right? Everyone is going to fall off. You're going to fall off multiple times.
Mm.
I think the trick is to acknowledge that and re-engage it. Um, find 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 ways to create re-engagement moments that are kind of to your point forgiving, right? So it's the same thing. Like if you let's say just to use another kind of exercise analogy, because I think a lot of people can relate. New Year's resolution, I'm going to start working out, every day. Well, I think especially for people who struggle with ADHD, you find yourself where it goes really well for a couple weeks, and then suddenly like something happens, you go on vacation, you spend a night in the hospital, you get very busy, blah, 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 blah. You miss 2 days, the all or nothing mentality kicks in. And now it's sort of like you see what it's like to miss, and the world didn't end, and you convince yourself you're going to go back. I think for things like that, the trick is to, on that January 1st day, say, I am going to mess up. And so how can I put in structures to make sure that I re-engage, right? And that could be the type of thing like, I don't know, for that example, no matter what, non-negotiably, I'm going to go to the gym every Monday, no matter what, right? So if a couple of weeks pass and suddenly you fall out of it, well, now you have a re-engagement moment baked in a couple of days, right? The same thing with, I know that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with keeping their workspace clean and organized. And, you might do a very good job of it for a while, and then you fall off. Same type of thing. Maybe the first Sunday of every month, you have a calendar event or a task or, a NoPlex task that says, okay, I'm going to do that. So even if it starts to get a little out of hand, you don't feel yourself drowning in it. You could always say, okay, well, at least next Sunday, I'm going to have to readdress it. So bake in structures to re-engage, knowing you're going to disengage at some point.
Can I suggest another one?
Please.
Okay, so maybe this is something that you can add in NoPlex. Just adding some things for you to add.
Feature list.
Yeah, exactly. Just add it in your list, your important one, not the curated one.
Right.
What's the other one that you called it?
Horizon
List. Okay.
Just today's view. Yeah.
This is today's important one is to add, so I'll backtrack and give you a bit of context. So for my clients, a lot of times they'll buy, like I'm laughing because I've got a candle set making toolkit, whatever, in the bottom here that I've used for maybe 3 times. And I was really into it. I was like, this is going to be my full-time job. I'm going to be making candles. I love the smell of them. I'm going to start making them. They're here. I can make them. Sure. But now they're just kind of like for my foothold. The thing is, like, we love hobby hopping, right? Like we love like going from one hobby to another. And again, it was that shame cycle that I went into, and a lot of the ADHD clients that I have. But when we stop and we say, well, maybe our superpower, I dislike that word a bit, but maybe our strength is that we can get so excited and so into something new all the time, which is remarkable. If you see a lot of people, when they see something new, they're like, I don't want to do it. It's new. I want to do the same thing 500 years. Now we're saying, okay, well, I can do something new every 2 weeks and I'm actually finding it exciting. Maybe we can add that into, not saying that we're going to fail with NoPlex or the list or whatever, but we add something random that you have to do, like a little quest. So for this week, the quest is that I need to go find a new dog outside and pet it or find out what's its name. And that's part of the Horizon list, Like I just add random stuff because that's, again, focusing on our strengths. I'm getting excited now looking at that dog that I'm going to go find.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's, we have the capability to do that. And we have thousands upon thousands of sort of ready-made tasks that fall into exactly what you're talking about. We don't have currently the idea of that automatically being added in, right? So we're very careful about when it comes to user experience design, there are these different, call them kind of like models, right? And one is, cockpit, one is, sidecar. The idea, especially for people with ADHD, we wanted to make sure everything was very much cockpit, right? You are in charge. Nothing is ever going to happen on your behalf without your permission. Our use of AI is very permission driven, right? It's suggestions that can be added, never, oh, we added this for you. And so because there's a trust thing there, we can certainly talk about how trust plays into that. So I think for a lot of people, they would see things appearing for them and say like, I didn't add this. Like, what is this trying to do? But making it an option that someone can kind of toggle on and off. Great idea. Yeah.
I was actually thinking about me adding it for my own NoPlex. So
sure. You certainly
I want to go find
like
that
a
dog
randomizer.
now. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I'll add a list of like fun things and NoPlex can randomize it for me. That is a good idea. Amazing.
I would actually probably use that just to keep things interesting.
Yeah, like like wheels. I love wheels. They always catch me with commercials. They're like, "Oh, you can get just put your email in and then you could spin the wheel." And I always spin the wheel, Matt. Like every single time. I'm on so many people's list. I get so many phone calls because I've just added my email and my number.
Oh my, I have never spun a wheel. I mean,
You
it
gotta do
it
it.
seems it seems fun to spin a wheel, but I just know it's never
Once you
going to end
spin,
well.
yeah, once you spin, you won't stop, babe. It's like once you pop. Anyways, okay, Carla, stick to the questions.
Sorry, when you said I love wheels, I thought you meant like tires.
Oh no,
I was like, that's a
no,
weird thing to be into. Like candles make sense. I like to pet dogs too. Never really thought about tires that much, but everyone's different.
no. Look, I mean, I am quirky, but tires is not. That's not one of them. Okay, so environment. How much does that matter? Things like sensory input. We know that this is important. Actually, there's a really cool study. This is going to get me all nerding out, but
Do it.
there's a really cool study that just came out that showed how different ADHD or sensory systems are. We always thought that it was, a lot of clinicians always thought that it was just autistic individuals that had these like very highly sensitive systems, but it's actually also ADHD. So thinking about that, the sensory input, visual clutter, digital clutter, which is a
Mhm.
big one, interruptions, are these actually executive functioning barriers, would you say?
So I would make the case that it's drastically different for everyone, right? And I'm sure that there is a scientifically scrutinous reason for that, but I don't understand it. So just as an example, I had uh, a roommate at one point in college who had pretty severe ADHD, and he could not have any music playing anywhere near him when he was studying. Right?
Yeah,
It
me
would
too.
like his brain would just go right to the music, and he would not.
Mm,
Right? My daughter, when she was younger, I would be reading her a book before bed, and she would be reading a different book while I was reading to her. And every once in a while, I would get irritated and say, like, you're not even paying attention to the book I'm reading to you. Like, what did I just say? And then she would repeat back the last three sentences. So she
mm,
was reading a book while having a book read to her, two different books, no problem. My
sure.
my old roommate couldn't even listen to instrumental music while they were studying. So it's completely different for everybody, right?
Mm,
And so I think you just have to answer for yourself. You have to figure out what works for you. You have to lean into, the strength. You have to lean away from wherever it causes problems for you. But I would say as a general rule, for the most part, a more simplistic environment,
mm,
less physical clutter, less noise clutter is probably going to do you well, because ultimately it's very easy to add noise. It's very easy to add visual
mm,
stimulation. It's harder to detract it.
yeah.
So I think start with a clean slate, if you will, as best you
Mhm.
can, but listen to yourself. It's very different for everyone.
Yeah. I found what works for a lot of my clients is to have like functional rooms. So for me,
Mm,
this is therapy. So this room is usually therapy. So I
mhm,
have like things that remind me of therapy, which gets me in that
mhm,
kind of like mindset. It's like, oh, okay, so now I need to go into therapist mode. Whereas
sure.
downstairs, it's more like academic mode. And then, outside is obviously more playing with my dog mode. So I'm more
Mhm.
relaxed there. But each room has a different function. That really helps me. But yeah, the less clutter, the better. Otherwise, we will get super distracted.
Yeah. And I think COVID taught a lot of us to create sort of themed places within our spaces for that, right? Suddenly
Yeah.
you found somebody who was sitting on the couch playing video games at the same place that they were doing $1 million deals for their finance job.
Mm,
Felt weird. Like there's almost like we all discovered the value of going to a place. This is the version of me that exists
mm,
in this place. That's the hat I'm putting on,
yeah.
and that's that. And then when I get up and walk away and go to the other one, different hat, different me, different place.
Mhm,
I think there's something to that.
yeah.
It being intelligent doesn't, make you immune to having to have like a physical audio, sensory change to put yourself in different places.
Yeah, not at all. I think actually, the more you think about different details, the
Mm.
more you need to have those details in line with what your function is. I
Sure.
think if
Yep.
I'm sitting at the couch, I'm noticing everything that makes me feel relaxed. So I'm
Sure.
like, okay, I'm gonna go into like a more of a relaxed state, and our brain just kind of follows. We're
Yeah.
the puppet master, you know. It's
Right. Right.
we're kind of like showing it what to think. Okay, before we run out of time, and I do want to see if there's any questions as well, but let me quickly go to, I want to ask you about NoPlex. So you created NoPlex after working closely with neurodivergent adults,
Mm.
being neurodivergent yourself, right?
Yeah. I was diagnosed with ADHD in my late 30s, sort of by accident. But the real inspiration for the app was my daughter that I mentioned, my teen daughter, and sort of supporting her through her journey, which was, much
Okay.
more dramatic than my own in a lot of
Okay.
ways.
And you said a teen daughter, so
Yeah.
she's, how old is she now?
13.
13. Oh, okay, that's a lovely age. I miss those days.
Oh, you can borrow her anytime.
She can come
You can
over to
take the teenage girl for
Portugal.
a while. We're good.
I really like teenagers. I love working with teenagers. I don't know. There's something. Yeah, I think it's because I was always seen as like such a rebel, and I
Mm,
knew what I was thinking. So when I see teenagers, I'm like, oh, I get it. You're
sure. Yeah.
saying this, but you're not meaning that. What were you seeing people struggle with that existing with existing support
Mm,
and advice? Like maybe with your daughter specifically, like what
sure.
kind of support did she receive that you found didn't work?
So that's a great question. I mean, I will say that if you are going to be diagnosed with ADHD in a way that has become invasive for your life, doing it in 2026, we're in a much better position than we were a long time ago, right? I remember the first time I ever had an employee come up to me many, many years ago and say, "Hey, I have ADHD. Could I have these accommodations, right? Could you move me away from the bathroom where it's a lot of traffic and stuff?" Like I remember then thinking to myself, like, "Oh, this is rare. Like people aren't
Mhm.
talking about this that much. Like that's very cool." In 2026, it's much more spoken about. There's a lot more in the way of technology. There's a lot more supports. I would say that once we began building NoPlex and we started speaking with users, we began to follow the data about how people were interacting with the product. We started to really understand where the holes were. So for us, it's a lot of things you might not really think about. So we have this concept called shortest path to intent, meaning that so for instance, again, you could just hit a plus button on your phone screen and you're creating a task. So
Mhm.
I could literally pick up my phone, hit plus, hit the little microphone, say something, swipe down, and now a task exists right on my horizon. So the idea of making it as short and quick and painless as
Mm.
possible to get things down,
Yeah, so
that was very
important.
that was very critical. And yet we called the red light test, right? I would, whenever we'd have a new feature, I would pull up to a red light in my
Yeah,
car and do the thing before the light changed.
yeah,
I always wanted to be able
nice.
to see like how fast. So things like that. Another one is, and this is a little more complex, but in order to continue to use something and find value in it, you need to be able to trust it in a way that you could trust it to be a companion in prioritizing yourself and your values. And so what I mean by that is, just as an example, let's say I get a a thing in the mail about my car insurance, and I look at it and I say to myself, "Oh, you know what? That seems high. I'm going to shop around for car insurance." So let's say I create a task to shop around for car insurance.
Mm.
Now, a couple weeks later, I'm looking at my app and shop around for car insurance is right there with drop medication off at mom's house, right? This
Mm.
felt important at the moment. I sort of hoarded the task, right? People with ADHD tend to do that, right? You tend to
Mhm.
like, this sounds important right now. I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it on there, blah, and then it
Mhm.
builds up. When you find yourself where these things that aren't actually that important are they're equals to the things that are actually really important, you lose trust in it. And for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to just abandon the app than it
Mhm.
is to clean it up and tidy it up. So what we've done is we build in this model where if things are over a certain age, if things have been carried over a certain number of times, it's surfaced in a moment to kind of tidy up and sort of help you curate that way. So, it's a lot of things like that. I won't get into all the details now, but we talked about re-engagement, with things like going to the gym or, the things that candles.
Hmm.
But NoPlex is very careful about how we re-engage, right? Depending on how you use the app, we try to re-engage with you in different ways. And so for us, it was really just about watching how people used it, listening to people. We're very serious about always listening to all feedback that we get, and basically just building in the things that were causing people to abandon other tools.
Yeah,
And now we have one that people just really rarely abandon, which is very exciting.
that's awesome. The engagement is there and it continues.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really good. Really good for ADHDers. I was thinking when you were speaking there's an app I'm not going to name and shame apps now, but it was a language app. I think everyone can guess which one it was. But there's one character in this app that gives these messages that says one of the characters replies and then she will remind me to come back to the app, but in such a quite a I don't want to say that word, but like quite a direct manner and quite rude actually. Like, hey, you haven't been on yet. What's wrong with you? Kind of vibe. And reading that as an ADHD, I always feel like I'm doing something wrong in any way, in any regard. And then reading that message, I felt so ashamed that I abandoned the app after doing this course for I think it was like 3.5 years. I was like, no, she's actually making me feel quite intimidated. So it's so important, the messages that we give our ADHDers for sure. Yeah, I can unmute you now. There we go. Sorry,
Yeah.
I had to quiet you.
I don't seem to have a mute button
That's
in this.
interesting.
It might be here somewhere. I just haven't used it. Oh wait, there. I'm good.
Okay, so I want to ask you about for someone listening and thinking, I understand this, but I still don't know how to implement it. How does NoPlex help bridge the gap between knowing and actually doing? I know we've spoken about this, but is there like a sentence that somebody can take home from this?
There we
I've
go.
unmuted.
No, sorry, I had to find the button again. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the core of everything that we built, right? It's a lot of the things that we already talked about. It's path to intent, re-engagement, tidying up, separating cognitive modes. But the biggest thing, again, one thing to take away, if there's one thing that we're doing well, and it's honestly something that you can just do with pencil and paper, is separate those cognitive modes. You know, don't exist in a place where you're constantly having to face the pile of things that you feel you need to do. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the cause of trying to actually get to a place where that's lessened. It never helps. Just separate those two things.
Yeah, I think that was actually one of my last questions too that I wanted to ask you if there was one thing that you would suggest, but I think you've answered this is that separation, and I do think it's quite powerful for people to have that ability to know that you can use your ADHD characteristics to your advantage and definitely not focus on shame so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share in terms of what you've learned maybe from a startup? It's a startup, right? The startup world too. And having ADHD yourself.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I would say this is it's applicable to the things that we use to manage our lives. I think it's applicable to running a business, and in our case, starting it from the ground up and growing it. Always audit what you have to do with the question, is this going to matter in a year? Like, that's such a powerful question,
Mhm.
right? Like, if you have a thousand things on your list, or something is stressing you out, or you're in an argument with someone, is this going to matter in a year? Will you even remember this in a year? If the answer is no, just start there, right? Like, a lot of things could be eliminated once you realize that.
Mm.
And also a lot of things could be deprioritized that can't be eliminated when you think of that. So just audit everything through that lens. Is this going to matter in a year?
Yeah,
If not,
I love that question for relationships too. So I do a lot of
yeah,
relationship therapy, and it's like, is it going to matter in 5 years, 5 months, 5 minutes from now? Because usually it doesn't. But I think especially with ADHDers and startups to me are so similar because we have so much to do in the startup world. I work with quite a few startups, and there's always these like burning tasks, like you have to get this done before Friday or before the end of day. And it's like, do we really have to do this before the end of today? I think we can actually learn from one another. And it's also, I think this is a personal belief, not a professional belief, but I believe that a lot of ADHDers go into the startup world because it is so inviting for those dopamine hits. Like, oh, we can do it today. Yes, I can write my thesis in one day if I push myself, but I might not be able to, like function for the rest of this year then. So it's
It,
good.
it's very true. I feel and I've learned this more over time as I've, especially early on in NoPlex, as I became more familiar with the entrepreneur and, capital raising ecosystem and really got to know a lot of people, in Philadelphia, Boston, DC, California. Oh no, a lot of founders are ADHD folks.
Yeah.
A lot of them, right? And yeah, I think for that exact reason that I talked about, you can task switch, you
Mm.
know, people are very adaptive. There's all the reasons that you talked about.
Mm.
It's huge overlap.
Yeah, the dopamine hits, right? It's like it's incredible. You go into a startup world. I know with one of my startups, like the one day we're like, well, we're not going to be able to sit this through, and then the following day we had massive funding, and it's like this roller
Yeah,
coaster of
right.
events. It's awesome for us, but we have to learn how to like you said, like have that horizon list and say,
Mhm.
okay, for today, I don't have to change the world. I can just like I need to remember to eat. That must be on our horizon
Right.
sometimes. Like, to
No,
go
that's one of
outside.
the pre-built tasks, right? Drink water, walk the
Yeah.
dog. Like, some people really struggle with those simpler things, and
Yeah.
we're here for it. We'll meet you there.
That's awesome. I'm gonna download Noteplex and add that I need to remember to eat because that's my biggest
You
thing.
do that.
I can do.
Recurring task every day.
Yes, exactly. I can do tasks that are massive, but the smaller things for me is very difficult to remember actually, because I
Sure.
don't have a motivation. Obviously, I don't cook, right?
Right, right.
I don't have anything to eat anyway. So like, what am I doing? Anyways, Matt, it was lovely chatting to you.
You too.
So yes, and we also yes, and exactly. Julia was also saying this is also true with autistic individuals, and that's
Mhm.
definitely true. Like we're talking about ADHD specifically because I think we got like zoned in on that, but yes, it is
That's
true
also been a
for
big focus of what we've done. It's,
yeah.
I think it gravitated there a bit.
Yeah, and true for autistic individuals. I mean, my therapist definitely wants to diagnose me as an ADHD, and I get fixated on my interest, and I get so honed in on it that I forget to live life. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's great. I think definitely try out Noplex, and we'll see you in the Neuro Nuggets in Caboose as well, hopefully. I'm going
absolutely.
to wrap up just to say thank you for your time, Matt. Thanks for being here early-ish. I'm happy it wasn't at 6 a.m., but it's at 8 a.m. This is just a reminder to the audience that we have a range of divergent discussions coming up. You can find all the details in the Caboose app, as well as our newly launched Neuro Nuggets, which is our short, practical guides that help you understand how your brain works and find ways to make work and life easier, relationships too. They're also for workplaces to help create more inclusive spaces created by neurodivergent people for neurodivergent people. So, people with lived experiences. We'll be sending out a very short 2-minute feedback survey after this and would really appreciate if you can fill this out for us. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your time and for everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Ciao.
I appreciate it.